evidently, or not evidently, PBS is doing a series on Native Americans, indigenous people, whatever the term is now. And I happened to watch part of one last night. I don't know what number it is in the series, but their attention was on Aztec and Comanche and the Iroquois and so forth. I didn't get all the way through it. Historically, and these are smart people, they're supposed to be. Historically, it's full of problems. They're presenting these American Indians as victims, or they were fighting against colonization. That's the word that they're using now. Let's get something out of the way. Yes, Europeans came to North and South America. They found it, and they proceeded to take over. And that is a fact of history. It didn't just happen here. The Native Americans were killing, conquering, enslaving each other long before we got here. The Aztec built a beautiful city, which is where Mexico City is now. But they were conquerors, and they had huge millions of people subject to them, and they committed human sacrifice against thousands upon thousands of people, and that was part of their faith. They needed blood to keep the world going. But 500 plus Spaniards, and they were tough guys, still were not going to be able to take over Mexico or the Aztec Empire without the help of other groups, other Indian groups within Mexico who were conquered by the Aztec and wanted to get rid of them. So you need to get that out of the way. The other is, they were talking about the Comanche, how they discovered the horse. Well, and of course the horse did come from the Spaniards or the white people. And they used it to hold back colonization. Well, that's bull. The Comanches were conquerors, and to be respected, they were a phenomenal warrior society. At one time, someone remarked that they were the best light cavalry in the world. And they subjugated other tribes and kept them under their thumb, and they looked upon the French and the Spanish and the Mexicans and us as people to just be run over, and they could do what they wanted. And they did for a long time. The Iroquois, who one quoted in there that Thomas Jefferson didn't know anything about democracy till he had gotten familiar with the Iroquois. Well, the Iroquois had a form of that, but they were also a conquering nation. They took over other tribes and other lands and so forth. And to say that Thomas Jefferson didn't know anything about republics or democracy before them is just the height of dumb, because that's one of the most well-read human beings ever on the planet. And don't tell me he didn't study the Athenian democracy and Plato and Aristotle and John Locke and Thomas Hobbes and Machiavelli. Maybe he hadn't read Machiavelli, I don't know. But the others, I know he did, Voltaire, Rousseau, and so forth. So this thing of always, I remember when Dances with Wolves, the movie, came out. Everybody talked about how it was the first time ever the viewpoint of the American Indian had been taken into account. Well, those people who are supposed to be movie critics and knowledgeable about movies didn't bother to look. But I think in 1950, James Stewart made a movie called Broken Arrow. White Feather came later in the mid-50s. But both of them were made from the viewpoint, one of the Comanche, one of the Cheyenne, and how the things happened. But this tremendous myth that the American Indian, or the Indians of the Americas, were peaceful and living in paradise is just a crock. They were no different than any other group. A lot of them were nomads. The Plains Indians, when they got the horse, proceeded to use the horse to beat the living daylights out of everybody else that they could. And Indian warfare was brutal. And all you have to do is really get in and study it. And I'm not saying that we weren't brutal. We were, and are. War is brutal. And throughout history, people have been on the move. And people have been dislocated, and people have been taken over. And genocide by everybody has been committed. The Zulus in Africa were a conquering empire, and they ran over everybody in their path for a long time. The Dutch, who settled South Africa, they got there roughly at the same time as the Bantu, who later outnumbered them. But the myth that the Bantu were there first is that, a myth. They really got there about the same time and fought it out over who would control it and whatnot. So that's, this continuing myth of the peaceful Indian. Well, the Indians were no more peaceful than any other part of the human race. And we've always, all of us have taken advantage of people we could take advantage of, and we've moved where we wanted to move. Part of the reason the Romans moved into Gaul was that the Gauls kept moving south and invading. And the Romans, at one time, they had actually taken over Rome a few hundred years before Julius Caesar, but they were trying to wall themselves off, but tribes kept moving south, so eventually they kept moving up and eventually took over that area. So you have the Assyrians pulled the Jews out of Israel to move them around, and the Persians and the Babylonians and the Mongols were on the move, and this, Tamerlane moved into India, and Persia, and Babur moved out of Afghanistan and conquered northern India and established the Mughal Empire, which lasted several hundred years. So, and the Hindus are really part of the Aryan Indo-European group that moved into India hundreds of years before the birth of, thousands of years before the birth of Christ. So, and put their stamp on everything. So, please get over this thing of everybody's a victim. Well, everybody is a victim until they can become the oppressor. And that's been the ongoing story. Now, part of the great thing about the United States is we really, and other places have tried, we really did make an attempt to help try to even things out and have a real rule of law. But now you have people wanting to destroy the very house that gives them the right to act nuts. And they don't know what's going to follow. I know what's going to follow. And all you have to do is read history and you know what's going to follow. But evidently our educators don't really understand that anymore and can't teach that. We're going to keep repeating and repeating and repeating the same screw-ups, I guess, until that we are no more. But you guys have a good day.